Hello and welcome to the DJ Force 10 in Conversation podcast, episode 183. And my very special guest on today's show is, it's been a long time waiting for this one, but it is Tamer Kattan. He is a stand-up comedian coming out of the US. He's currently not in the US, but back, I would say about 4 years ago, I interviewed a band called Gears, their drummer, Jimmy Wooten, and he recommended him to me, and I love stand-up, so I went and checked him out, and absolutely loved what he does. Tried to hook things up back then, didn't quite work out. I tried again last year. Time zones didn't really line up, so we couldn't get it done. But then he moved to Europe, and we got it done finally. But you'll hear about all about his move to Europe and everything in the podcast. He's currently got a vlog called "Nice to Marry" with him and his good lady wife, and it's very, very inspiring. It's very kind of real, and I suggest anyone that's interested in sort of like the human life, I guess, and mental health and things like that, do check it out. It's very interesting, and it's I think they're going to try and do it. I think they're doing it weekly, but do check it out. It's on his YouTube channel of his name, Tamer Kattan. That's TamerKattan. And like I said, it's been a long time coming, this one, and I'm absolutely fucking loving the fact that he's on the show, which is brilliant, and we talk about a whole bunch of other stuff, so look forward to that. Thanks to everyone checking out Beach Riot last week. Fantastic band, do check them out. And I've got plenty more in the pipeline coming up. We're just sort of like getting through some interviews. I've got a very special challenge with Total Rock at the moment as well, where we intend to interview every band that's going to be on this year's Download Festival in the UK. Now, obviously it's completely up in the air that it may not happen, but we're still going to do this anyway. We want to get every band that was on it, and it's a good way of like promoting the festival first and foremost. It's a good place to promote bands because there's a lot of like smaller bands on it this year, and also it's great for the fans because they're not going to be able to get to these festivals. Some of them will have the capability of watching them online, if any of them set up any kind of like online concerts or anything like that. But it's a great place to hear from them as well. So look out for that. It's going to be on this channel, but it's also going to be on the Total Rock channel as well. So I'm going to sort of simul release it across both. So if you're a subscriber to this, you're going to get it anyway. And it'll go to any sort of like Total Rock side of things as well, which is absolutely awesome because the show is associated with Total Rock. I wanted to put their name on it because they gave me an outlet with the In Conversation radio show. And with the podcast, I just wanted to branch more into that sort of medium with this show, this sort of chat-based show. And there are some things coming in the future with it as well. I'm going to start using online like video capturing stuff and things like that for like kind of like face-to-face interviews and things like that. If you want to see my ugly mug, that'll be absolutely fine. But yeah, finally, please like, review, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. It really does help. And please look out for Tamer Kattan in the future. I know in Spain he's doing some socially distant shows at the moment, so do check them out if you are over that side of the world. If not, he is planning on making himself a bit more well known across Europe and things like that. But I present to you Tamer Kattan. Enjoy. So I'd like to welcome to my show today, I have stand-up comedian Tamer Kattan here. Welcome, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Barnaby.
Absolutely my pleasure, man. It's actually been a while to get you on this show. I was looking through my messages and I've seen ones dating back to, I think, 2017.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
It is.
So, yeah.
But time differences, whatnot. I mean, at that point, I was in Florida. I was living out there in the sun life for a bit, the crazy part of the States, if you will. And and it was actually another guest on the show that I had, Jimmy from Gears. was my sort of like put on to you. I had him
yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, I had him on the show back in, I think it was 2016, end of 2016. And
yeah, he's such a good guy, man. I love Jimmy.
Yeah, he's really, really nice, and we've remained connected since as well, which is really cool. And I'm going to get Gears back on the show at some point as well, because they're starting to release some new music.
Right on,
which is awesome. But no, it was just one of those things. At the time, I was like, I've always been a fan of stand-up comedy. Back when I was a lot younger, I ran, or I co-ran a comedy night at a venue that I started working at as a sort of sound and lighting technician. And
cool.
We'd have like the sort of like, it would be like the sort of like circuit comedians like doing like just outside of London shows and stuff like that, the Perrier winners and stuff like that and all that kind of stuff. And I've just had a real love for it since then. I've always like watched, Eddie Izzard, Lee Evans, Billy Connolly, the sort of classic British comedians, and obviously we got Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor and Bill Hicks and all that kind of stuff. So we got that influence from the States. And I love all the sort of stand-up shows on TV, all that kind of stuff. So you're actually my second stand-up comedian on the show.
Oh, cool. I'm honored.
The first one was Don Jameson last year, actually. He had a comedy album release, and
right on.
Had him on there. So, but no, I was just sort of, what I want to try and do is sort of just get your, a bit of an origin story, if you will, when it comes to your sort of like stand-up comedy and things like that. And we'll move on to what you're doing now as well, because that's quite interesting. The sort of new video or video cast, I think they call, I don't know what they call them. But
sure. Yeah, I think vlog is the word. We YouTube channel or whatever, but yeah, I guess it's like a video blog / social experiment.
It is very, I do want to get onto that because that sounds really, really, really cool. But I just want to get a bit of an origin story. So where you kind of got like started in comedy and stuff like that, what really kind of drove you towards that? Because it's not an easy path. And you seem to have made some kind of headway on it. So,
yeah, thanks, man. For me, it was funny. I was just speaking to a friend last night where I said, it sounds so stupid and cliche, but it's like I didn't really pick comedy. Comedy picked me, and I think you see there's a lot of similarities with music and comedy. And the way I found myself getting into comedy was actually through music. At a really early age, when we first immigrated to America, it was the first time I really got picked on and bullied when we moved to America. Because in Egypt, I was, people liked me, people were nice to me, I looked like everybody else, and people just knew Egyptians were just people, And then we get to America and there's all this racism, and it was way before terrorism or anything like that. It was just kids would hear on the news, or their parents would hear that gas prices were going high, and then their parents would cuss out Arabs, and then they come to school and be like, I know one of those, and then they'd try to beat me up.
Brilliant.
So I had like a terrible first couple of years in America, and then I had this really weird experience where I got bit in the face by a dog. A pit bull bit me in the head.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it was really wild. Like, he bit me across my eyebrow, and when I pulled my head away, his tooth slit my eyelid open. Like, that's how close he came to, eating my eye. And, I had to wear an eye patch for a year, and then kids started calling me a pirate. And so I started, going to the library after school, because that's where I hid from bullies. And I read every children's book about pirates I could. And then I moved on to books. And then the adult books, my life changed, because that's when I realized that pirates were not bad guys. They were actually war veterans returning from war. And that's why they had peg legs and hook hands. They'd lost them fighting for their country. And it was Hollywood that illustrated them as evil, but they weren't. They actually had bylaws, and they did what they had to do because they were lied to by a country. And at that point, I kind of identified with pirates. I said, wait a minute, I'm not a bad guy either, but the people keep treating me like I'm a bad guy, and I'm not a bad guy. And all of a sudden, I was watching movies and I started rooting for the Indians instead of the cowboys, and I was rooting for the robbers instead of the cops. And I started listening to punk rock.
Nice.
And when I started listening to punk rock, one of the bands I loved was the Subhumans from the UK, and they had this song called Subvert City. And Subvert City, there was a song. In the song, they sang about a comedian, and I found myself kind of being thrown into the comedy world unintentionally. Battle rapping that they talk about in 8 Mile, right?
Yeah.
Well, battle rapping has its origins in slavery in America, because in America they used to slaves one at a time unless there was something wrong with them, and then they would sell them by the dozen. And those dozen slaves would be in a cage and they'd all make fun of each other as a way of relief. And so that's where battle rapping came from. And to this day on the street, they call battle rapping playing the dozens. And so I was in this school and they made fun of me every day. And I found myself being part of the dozens. They would just walk up to me and start making fun of me. And I'm like, what's happening? What's happening? And then after being humiliated for a year, I finally learned to fight with words. And so from that point forward, words became really powerful for me. And then one of my bullies came up to me and said, hey man, if you stop making fun of me, I'll stop beating you up. And I was like, whoa, words are powerful. Yeah. And all of a sudden I found myself listening to a whole lot of Richard Pryor albums and being able to identify with him. And I felt like Richard Pryor wasn't just an underdog. He was an underdog that fought back. And that to me was what a real comedian was. It was an underdog that fought back. And that's what punk rock was to me. And that's what any form of storytelling where it was an underdog fighting back is what I was attracted to.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I found my path to comedy.
That's amazing. Cause, that's such a different route from what I've heard from, say, other comedians and stuff as well. It's, cause a lot of comedians I find do come from a sort of darker place where they've managed to turn comedy into that outlet to either deal with it or just to battle against it, like you say with the sort of rap battles and stuff like that. It was a sort of it's to sort of keep your head up, if you will, and it also keeps your mind going as well, because that's the worst thing, because if people are on you and your mind goes, that's it. They've won. Oh yeah. And that's the sort of point where, a lot of people unfortunately fall to, and that leads to whatever that leads to, be it a life of complete, disappointment or a life of crime or whatever, and things like that, or you fight against it and you can kind of you find that avenue, and suddenly you find it in, like you found it in, stand-up comedy, whereas my sort of outlets were through music. I was in a band when I was younger, so a lot of that sort of like frustration and like through songwriting, through performing, you kind of got that kind of like that inner kind of like, I guess, darkness out of you in some way, in a constructive way. Yeah. So, I mean, from there, you sort of found yourself into sort of like comedy and stuff, but where was your sort of like, where was your first show? What was your first show? Do you remember it?
I do. So I had a really crazy thing happen. When I was in high school, I was really good friends with this guy named John Silver. And John Silver and I were both known as the funny guys at school. And half the school thought John was the funniest, half the school thought I was the funniest. John was a year older than I was, and his sister and I dated in junior high school. Years later, I was coming back from a trip to Europe, and I bumped into his sister at a supermarket. By the way, his sister is now married to Dick Van Dyke. It's really funny, crazy story. Yeah. So she bumped into me and she said, hey, you won't believe this. John is stand-up comedy. Do you want to go to the show? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, please. I want to go. So her and I went to the show together, and I was so blown away. He wasn't just the best comic. He was the best comic in the show by a mile. So I thought, if John is that much better, and in school we were, neck and neck, maybe I have a chance to at least have fun with this and not look like a complete idiot. So I took a class and didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And then after I took the class, there was a big comedy club in LA, and I had professional comedians coming up to me saying, hey, keep doing it. And, and so I was like, whoa, this is interesting, and I'll keep doing it. And right from the get-go, right when I started comedy, I was doing, like, my first joke was about child abuse. It was really weird. Like, I remember my first joke. It was, have you guys ever met someone that bullied you so badly you hated everyone with his name? And I go, that's why I hate guys named Dad. And the audience kind of recoiled, but then you heard these big laughs in the very back from the professional comedians.
Nice.
And they came up to me after and said, dude, you're a comic. Like, you got to keep doing this. So I was like, hey, okay, I'm in.
No, that's amazing. Like, and especially starting that way as well, with your first joke being something along those lines. It's that's brave, for one, because like you don't normally go up there, and you wouldn't go for the jugular, if you will, straight off the bat. And you'd have like maybe some light material, then go into something like that. But no, that's really fucking cool.
Sure. Oh, thanks, man.
So I mean, from there, obviously you start, I guess, getting sort of like open mic nights and stuff like that, I assume. I'm not sure what the route is. I mean, I know it is for a musician. You do, open mic nights are an option for a sort of singer-songwriter. But what's it like for a comedian? That kind of like, we call it, I call it the toilet route here, where you're playing pretty much every back room. But what was it like for you, sort of doing that?
Yeah, exactly. I was lucky. I mean, LA has a very active comedy scene, as you can imagine. Like it's almost like the Olympics of comedy, where everybody comes there. I feel like people come to LA when they're ready, so it was really weird developing in a place where most comics finish, The nice thing is when I go to open mics, a lot of the open mics were also filled, not just with comics, but with comics that were also bookers on shows.
Okay.
So, these comics would see me, and bookers they started inviting me to booked shows and paid shows and shows with real audiences. So I got up every night, I was obsessed. I went up every night after work. It became my medicine, and I had a pretty bad cocaine problem, and comedy was the only thing that made me stop. Cause I told this to my therapist, and my therapist agreed. I said, I don't think I was ever drugs. I was not feeling sad, because my dad would always say stuff like "boys don't cry" and be a man and all this other stuff. He was a really macho military guy.
Yeah.
And then my friends also kind of knew me as the funny guy. So whenever I wasn't funny, they kind of went like, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" So I never felt like I had permission to be sad. So I used cocaine 7 minutes at a time to make me unsad until my freaking nose imploded, and I started going to therapy, and the therapist is like, why do you think you were able to get clean so fast? And I said, because I was addicted to not feeling sad. I wasn't chemically addicted, and he agreed. So I got addicted to comedy. I replaced cocaine I replaced cocaine with comedy the way a lot of people in AA replace alcohol with cigarettes and coffee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was lucky, people, and I have kind of a different childhood, and people are always looking to have like a different mix of people in their lineups. And there weren't very many comics that were like sleeved in tattoos, bald with a Muslim dad and a mom, So people were putting me up, and I went to college in Sweden, even though I'm from America, and I had a lot of friends in Europe, and they encouraged me to do the Edinburgh Fringe in Scotland.
Yeah.
So about 2 years into comedy, I went and did the Edinburgh Fringe, and at the Fringe, I won this competition called Best New International Act Under 2 Years, and I got signed by a manager, and then I came back to the States and quit my day job, which was advertising. I was a copywriter at an ad agency. So I quit my day job. I sold my house. I sold my car. I went from a house in the Hollywood Hills to living in a piece of shit apartment owned by a comedy club, a flat, and with no windows. And every time we showered, we had to open a skylight on the roof so that the paint wouldn't peel off the walls. It was behind a chicken shop. And so our front door was over a fence. So I'd come home late at night from shows, and people would think it was a dumpster behind the fence. So I'd come home to, no joke, minimum 4 bags of chicken bones on my front doorstep every night. It was brutal.
That's horrible. That's horrible.
And I was still happier than I was with a house on the Hollywood Hills
Yeah.
doing cocaine alone in a living room, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's I mean, like, that's dedication to, you know, to sort of like give up, I guess, everything and really try and make a living from it, at least, or at least, you know, go, because like the music industry, the comedy industry, I'm guessing is very, like, there's only a few comics that really kind of like skyrocket, if you will, and you've got, I mean, there are obviously, you get like ones that are the circuit comics, the journeyman, if you will, and yeah, no, I was just like, it's such a, it entwines so much with a sort of like, as a career musician, you know, it, like, the way that works, like going out and just entertaining a crowd, but everyone starts at that kind of like low level and they have to cut everything, you know. And you know, and it comes along with addiction and stuff as well. So drugs, drink, you know, whatever your poison is on that front. And a lot of people do manage to sort of turn that around if that is affecting them, like yourself. You know, you didn't use it as a sort of an addiction, like you said. You're using it as a, you know, just to, I guess, make you happy on that front. But from there, I mean, like, when I sort of like got to start, when I started sort of noticing you on that front, like after I spoke to Jimmy, I noticed you were like, I saw you on TV in the States.
Cool.
You did the, I think I wrote down the Comedy Knockout on True TV, and that was really cool because you had a Brit comedian with you as well. You had Gina Yashir.
Yeah, she's my idol.
She's one of our finest, if you will.
Absolutely, and I'm proud to call her a friend. It's great, man. It was really cool because one of my favorite, I ended up winning the episode, and Gina and I were it was me against Gina, and in the background behind me, my favorite photograph is me holding up a trophy and Gina behind me flipping off the camera.
Oh, nice.
So great.
That's awesome. I mean, doing stuff like that, I mean, you've had, when you did like the Edinburgh Fringe and stuff, did you get any like TV coverage over here as well, over in England?
Yeah, little things here and there, but nothing as big as Comedy Knockout.
Because obviously you travelled the world now, obviously doing this, and we'll bring it on to where you are right now. You're in Spain. Exactly. And the story of you getting there, I think, is quite amazing on,
thanks.
on that front, and it kind of ties in with your vlog as well. But what I want to do is sort of get the story behind that, because you were seeing someone on an app, Bumble, quite a well-known sort of like dating app, if you will. I mean, you were in was it New York at the time? I think it was, or LA, and
exactly. I was in New York,
and she was in Spain.
Yeah, she was in Barcelona.
Yeah,
and it's funny because I was pretty poor when I was in university, and after I lived, I didn't have much money when I first left university, and I missed traveling. So the way that I would travel is to go online, and, you know, through videos and pictures and stuff, it would be my way of sort of traveling in my mind. And when quarantine started in New York, a lot of people don't realize quarantine is so much more severe in New York than LA, because the flats are so much smaller, you know? And so I found myself in this tiny little apartment, you know, and starting to freak out a little bit. So I resorted to what I used to do when I was a kid. And I found out that Bumble had this feature called Passport, where you could put yourself in another country and chat with people there. And so that's what I did. And that actually kind of had an impact on the way we communicated with each other. I found this Swedish girl. We totally hit it off. In a way, and it got me, I was surprised to be excited, you know, because it wasn't the reason why I was on the app. I didn't think I was going to meet anyone. I thought I was just really traveling, you know, and we hit it off. We laughed a bunch. I thought she was beautiful. But because it was so far away, we almost started playing this game of truth or dare with how honest we could be. Even my profile, you know, I saw all the other profiles and they were all like, oh, I'm great at this, I'm great at that. So I just made a profile where I said, I'm shit at this, shit at that. I'm selfish. I'm a poor communicator, probably why my whole life. I just pretty much told the brutally honest truth. And I'm sure it turned off a lot of people, but for her, for some reason, she was intrigued and she messaged me and told me all the things that were shitty about her. And we started this thing sort of way of communicating with each other. And over time, I felt like almost more seen than I'd ever been seen because of this line of communication. She knew more about me than almost some of my closest friends did. And it was almost by accident. But after about a month or so, I'm like, I have to meet her. And I was lucky. I already had COVID, and we both had COVID pretty early on. And I had gone and gotten a test and had documentation from a doctor that proved that I had the antibodies. And the law in Spain was open to European countries and around June 2020. So I said, I'm going to go see her and let's spend the summer together. And she said, yeah, come and stay with me. My flatmate is in Germany. He's staying there. And why don't you just come and stay with me and each other? And I said, sure. And I went to the Department of Recreation, whatever it was, in Spain, and I got a QR code and I was all legal and I had all my paperwork with me. And I tried to get into the country. And right when I got to the border and she was 500 feet away, they stopped me and said, you can't come in. The law changed when you were in the air.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And they're like, nope, you can't come in. And I'm like, what does this mean? And they took my passport, they took my luggage, they took me to a police station and then into a jail and told me I was going to spend the night there. And the next day they brought me a translator and an attorney, told me my rights and put me back on a plane and sent me to Heathrow. Huh? And Heathrow, I was going to treat myself to a hotel after sleeping on the ground in a jail cell. And when I got to Heathrow, all the hotels were closed. And I was like alone in Heathrow I had to sit in a chair for 18 hours till my flight, till the next flight. It was, I could feel my brain snapping. Yeah. Like I was totally going to snap. And then I got back home and I told her, I said, I don't quit. That's not what I do. And we're going to find a way. And I was worried that she was going to lose hope, but she didn't. She even stayed on the phone with me the whole time I was in the airport, you know?
Oh, wow.
And I got home and thanks to music again, you know, I found that John Lennon and Yoko Ono got married in Gibraltar. And Gibraltar was this amazing little country that was allowing Americans in. They had no COVID deaths, excellent tracing. And so I bought a ticket the day I landed back in America. I bought a ticket to go back a week later, which was crazy because I was exhausted, you know?
Yeah.
And a week later, we were meant to meet in Gibraltar, but every day we watched the news with so much anxiety because we just kept hearing about Americans behaving more and more you know, and you know, this horrific president that we have doing horrible things.
Yes.
And we just thought it was going to happen to us again, you know? And we finally did it. He flew to Malaga and then took a taxi 2 hours or a car 2 hours to get to Gibraltar. And then we met for the first time. And the day I met her is the day I asked her to marry me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then we were supposed to be in Gibraltar 2 days and get married, but because of COVID, even our birth certificates arriving via DHL and FedEx, that got delayed by 2 weeks. So we lived on that little island country or it felt like an island for 2 weeks, going from hotel to Airbnb to hotel. And I thought I was going to live in Gibraltar because she was going to have to go back because of her work. And then, you know, we'd get married over a weekend or something, but we did it. We got married and we walked across the border, got a rental car, drove to Barcelona. We've been here for the last 6 months.
That is absolutely amazing. And like,
oh, thanks,
just like whirlwind amazing. And I think, yeah. I mean, obviously the fact you got on, like, just because I find, like from experience of my own, like chatting online with various people or, you know, with someone, you know, you get a lot of the sort of, bullshit out the way, if you will. You know, there are some sort of like we can throw a sort of like curtain up and pretend various things, which obviously,
yeah,
you know, you found someone that was like, you know what, that's not bullshit. Let's just be perfectly honest. You've been perfectly honest on here, and you know, and you get that kind of great connection, which is obviously what you've got, and that leads on to your video, your vlog, if you will, and what you're doing with there is is, from what I understand, it's with you and your wife. It's called Nice to Marry You, which I think is a very cool name. And
exactly.
basically you talk about or you just have some of the discussions that you have, and like in front of a camera.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are people who got married the day we met. You know, it's not supposed to work. But it's been, all my life I've struggled with relationships. My dad had PTSD from war. He never went to therapy. I got physically abused by him. And, and I didn't believe in therapy. But once I started going to therapy and I tried so many different ways to connect with people, but it just wasn't working for me. And I really thought I was going to die alone. And then when I met her and I did this one simple thing, which is be unconventionally honest, it started working, and it's the best relationship I've been in. I feel like a completely different person. And, so we decided, hey, when I was a comic, having an audience in front of me forced to stay honest. You get rewarded for being honest on stage. And I liked having an audience because it kept me being honest. So I said, if we put a camera on our marriage and once a week we take turns talking about the things that we're most afraid of or the things that are bugging us, then, maybe it'll keep us honest, and maybe it'll help, another person who might be like me that's out there who's like, hey, I don't know what to do. There's all these different forms of advice and it's confusing. Yeah. And maybe just watching people who are trying to make it work will be okay.
Yeah, no, definitely. And from your latest video, just called Fuck John Wayne. I watched that and yeah, I mean, I come from an era as well where, boys don't cry, to put it that way. Yeah. And, we rarely talk about our feelings and things like that. And that has affected my mental health growing up. It's something that I deal with pretty much every day. I actually medicate for it as well. And things like that. So, I mean, I'm a big advocate of sort of like being, it's okay not to be okay. It's even better to talk about it. Me and my partner, my wife, we talk about stuff. Sometimes I do get into a sort of like thing where I let things build up, and I'm aware of that a lot more now, where I let it kind of go, let it go, and then suddenly now it's a problem. But my wife she knows the triggers. She knows what I do like beforehand. She knows me very well. And it's the same with her as well. So if anything's bugging her, and that's what I love about your video blogs. It is what a relationship, I think, should be for the most part. It's that level. It's talking through either your disagreements or if something's bugging you, even if it's not directly related to them personally, it's still good to talk about that. If it's something that affected you when you were younger, obviously you've been through quite a lot with your dad and things like that. And obviously that's going to be heavily traumatic on that front. But if you've now started going, you started seeing a therapist, which is a massive step. A lot of people, like, the biggest step is making that call to someone.
Yeah, I agree.
And it does take you, like when I've had various sort of family members pass away and stuff, which is another sort of like reason I'm, using, I'm on, what they call it, fluoxetine or Prozac, if you will, I think is the US version.
Yeah.
But, and to sort of deal with that side of things. But the biggest step for me, taking medication was relatively straightforward. It was a little tricky to start with, getting your body getting used to the chemical balance and whatnot. But the biggest thing for me was trying to talk to someone and making that call. Like, I got given phone numbers for various places, be it bereavement counselling, be it work-related stress, be it, just general depression sort of side of things. And I remember making a call and putting the phone down the first couple of times, like ringing, putting it down, ringing, putting it down, because there's an element of scare. But then once I got through, once I just said, no, I'm not going to hang up. I can't hang up. I have to do this. That's the biggest step. And then the evolution from that is what you are doing right now is but you're putting out into sort of like the public light, which is amazing for, you know, for like you say, you're trying to maybe inspire some other people, help some other people. It's not directly what you're doing. Like you said, I think in one of your videos saying we're not giving advice. We're just doing what we do. And then if it helps,
exactly,
awesome. And that's what I think is absolutely fantastic about this thing you're doing.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. That's really nice.
It's like I said, it's really cool. And like I said, mental health I'm a huge sort of like whenever I've spoken to musicians, especially over this last year, it's been huge because we've all been locked in our houses, our apartments, our, you know, rooms. You know, some people just living in a room. You know, they said you had a tiny apartment, things like that, and after a while, you start to go a little bit stir crazy. You know, we were allowed out to exercise. You know, I'd take the dog out for a walk and whatnot. But I'm in the house with me and my wife, and I've got 3 kids in the house and a dog as well. And so
that's nice.
So we were like homeschooling. I was kind of working from home, like doing various things for the company I work for. My wife's working from home. The kids are getting sort of rough education over Zoom and things like that. And you know, after a while, I need to go out. It was like a couple of weeks into that first lockdown, I was like, I need to go out for a drive or something. But you weren't allowed to. You know, it was like, don't do it. You know, there's nothing. It's not worth it if you get stopped by the police and get fined for it or whatever.
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
I found solace in kind of doing this podcast. I ended up speaking to people from around the world, various sort of like levels of rock band and various musicians basically. And that really helped, like, along with sort of like spending time with the family and everything, speaking to people was the big thing.
Definitely. It makes a difference. I think the thing that convinced me to go to therapy was a friend of mine, who's in a punk band, but I can't say which band, but let's say they're very influential to me growing up, and then we became friends in my adulthood. And he said, he's like, listen, going to therapy does not mean you're weak. Going to therapy means you're breaking free of the brainwashing.
Yeah.
He's all, understand this. He's all, women grow up with impossible physical standards. Men grow up with impossible emotional ones. The government tries to influence the way that your parents raise you so that they can, as a soldier, so they can use you as a worker. That's why they try to remove emotions from your life, so that you do what you're told. And when they tell you to do evil things, dirty things, that you'll keep doing them. He's also, going to therapy is fucking punk rock. And I was like, oh my God. And he's totally right, man. We are all in a cult.
Yeah.
All of us are in a cult, and it's the cult of corporations.
Yep.
They control us. They manipulate us. They make us feel bad about ourselves. They make us feel good about ourselves. They manipulate our feelings so they can use us like fuel.
Yeah. And
it's up to us to break free and live better lives and have the future generations be more free of that bullshit.
Yeah. No, totally. And I've been like trying to wean myself, because like I've spent a lot of time on social media, which is a huge sort of time suck for me. And I can't remember. I can never remember who this quote comes from, but I was reading a book about, I guess it was about the addiction of social media. But they say it's like every time you open up, say one of them, though, so Facebook, Instagram, whatever, it's the equivalent to pulling on a one-arm bandit, like a fruit machine, gambling basically. So you pull that lever, and then your fruit's going to come up, the cherry's going to come up. You're going to get any likes, you're going to get any, comments, you're going to get any, that sort of thing. And that at that point, that resonated with me so much. I was just like, oh my God. Yeah. And then obviously there's the documentary on Netflix and stuff like that about the sort of like social network side of things, and how they have manipulated, or how they, they try and keep you on the platform. So they use it, whether it's going to feel good for you, make you feel good, make you feel bad. It's, what was sort of created as a as with anything, created it with like the naivety that it wouldn't be used for evil. But then like these companies have figured out that, we can target these ads to people. We can make them believe certain political, enhance the political view of a certain party. And I mean, we've seen it on a big scale with the US elections and stuff like that. They're saying that the social media was manipulated by outside parties to favor votes initially and stuff like that. And it's such a powerful tool that it's like anything, it's been weaponized. And
exactly.
And I'm trying to sort of like, I use it for sort of like business reasons now, more than anything. So for this, for instance, because it is a good tool to promote this sort of stuff, even though we're bad mouthing them. But it's sort of also like I noticed my kids are sort of getting to that age where they're sort of like early teens, and I've given them a phone and just so they've got something if they get stuck somewhere at school or whatever. But they use the sort of like the social media that's big for the kids, so things like TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that. And I see their screen time, which is, something that I can sort of share with them and say, look, you spent this long on this app. You spent like, a day doing this over the last week. So we're going to cut back. Being able to sort of like see it and actually control it and actually do as I am, trying to think of the term, practice what I preach, I think is the best way of putting it, because otherwise I could be sat there slumped on the couch scrolling through whatever. But I try not to be. I try, and I'm trying to get off that. Like it's like a drug. It's so weird. It's like just trying to detox off something.
It really is.
But that's just sort of like what I'm trying to do at the moment. I tried to work on it like last year. It was very difficult because you're locked in the house. That's your outside world, which is
it's wild, dangerous. Man. It doesn't even feel real. It doesn't feel real. I think we're in it, so we don't realize how crazy this is. Until we're out of this, we're going to look back at this and be like, what a crazy fucking thing that we just went through. Yeah,
and everyone went through it. The only good thing that
everyone went through it. That's the other thing that's weird. It's weird to be miserable and have it be a shared misery. You'd think, if anything, it would unify people, right? Like it's as if you went to an escape room and no one can figure out how to get out, so we all just started fighting. Like it doesn't make. That's not how you get out of an escape room. It doesn't make sense. The one thing that does give me hope, though, is I have a friend who's a social psychologist. Says, look, this has happened before in 1918, and what happened after 1918? And I said, what? And he goes, the Roaring '20s. That's what happened after 1918. People had an appreciation for life. They started celebrating life again, and they started reprioritizing what mattered again, and they broke free of all the bullshit of corporations and before they got brainwashed again, maybe a decade later. But during the 20s, life got really fun. And I think we're in for, there's a very bright light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah,
no, definitely. And I can see that. It was difficult at some points last year, but I think now it's kind of, that's what you have to look forward to. Because if you do anything else, again, like I think I said at the start, you will lose yourself. Your head will go.
Agreed.
And that will be it. It's like, I mean, not game over, but it's just sort of, it's won. It's beaten you. And it hasn't beaten us yet. So we're still fighting against it. And there's still, that if you want to call it a war against it, but it's just sort of making sure that my friends are okay. I'm making sure that my work colleagues are okay. I'm making sure that, obviously my family are okay and stuff as well. So we're keeping in, like, that's what's been beautiful about this as well, is like keeping in contact with people that you may not have spoken to for a long time. And that's something
100%. That's been great.
Yeah. And I've discovered so much music as well, which has been amazing for me as well. Cause obviously being a musician, it's kind of, I've kind of skipped over a lot of music that, at the time, I was only looking for like the sort of like the concentration of the single, if you will, with it to play at the club or to play on radio or anything like that. Now I can actually appreciate bands' full albums, and I'm getting back into some music that I was into a long time ago, like sort of more of the sort of like prog music and stuff like that, and like just some heavy bands that have just sort of passed me by, and I haven't really been able to, and I've just suddenly had this opportunity to absorb all this music, and it's been liberating, especially mentally.
That's sort of awesome.
Just to have that, but onto the sort of music side of things. Because you've mentioned you're into your sort of, you like your punk rock. That was what you sort of grew up with, and that's what sort of gave you the perspective, I guess, at that point to sort of grow from there. But what are your favourite bands? I mean, you mentioned Subhumans earlier as one of them, and I know you're sort of that old sort of like punk rock. So I'm guessing things like Germs and Sex Pistols, stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think what happened with me with punk rock was that at the time I was also a big fan of Charles Bukowski, and Bukowski had this great quote where he said, "When the form appears, the spirit wanes." You know, he broke conventions all the time, and people said, "Oh, he's not a real poet. It has to be like this. Structure needs to be like that." And he was like, "Fuck structure." Yeah. And it reminded me of like punk music, where, you know, you mentioned the Germs, horrific musicians,
yes,
right, horrible, but they sang with passion, and the stuff they sang about, they gave a shit about. You know, Darby was bleeding on the stage from himself because he gave a shit about what he said, and that opened up my whole world to me. There were so many things that I felt like I can't do this and I can't do that because I haven't followed the protocol. But punk rock to me meant freedom, you know? And so the bands that I loved, I mean, the bands that I loved because of their musicianship later on were bands like Danzig and Sam Hain. But I just loved music that was played passionately, you know? So Suicidal Tendencies was a huge band for me. Nice. Dead Kennedys, Toy Dolls, Velvet Underground, which wasn't technically punk, but what the stuff they sang about was punk rock. You know, singing about drag queens walking through the streets in New York, in the Village, and the set it was wild, you know, that kind of stuff that opened up my world. And, you know, through songs and through ideas and concepts, slowly removed 1, 2, 3, and 4 pieces of software that were installed in my computer without me knowing. You know, it was like, there's so many, like, you know, everybody complained about that U2 album that they put on our iPhones without us knowing. There's a whole bunch of U2 albums that are put in our software that we don't know about. You know, like when I went to Sweden and I saw a Stallone movie that was rated X, and then I saw a regular Swedish movie that was rated PG where a guy pulled down his pants and waved his penis around. And then a Swedish friend laughed at me and he said, "Oh yeah, you're American. You guys rate your movies by sex. We rate our movies by violence." And I went, wait a minute, I didn't make that decision. America did. Yeah. And they put it in my software, and I don't want that in my software. I want to delete that software out. And that's what punk rock did for me. It made me realize how much of it wasn't my fault. You know, like songs by Suicidal Tendencies were said, "How can you say I'm crazy when I went to your schools, your church, your institutional learning facilities?" You know, it was that kind of stuff where all of a sudden adults were singing about feelings that I had, and it just made me feel seen.
That's amazing. No, that's sort of like,
thanks, man.
No, that's really cool. I mean, it's just like having that, like, especially like when it's the same when I discovered like heavy metal. It is that kind of like my whole household is, you know, for music taste purposes, are all sort of like pop music. So whatever bubblegum pop music there was at the time, that's what they're into through the 80s and 90s and stuff like that. My dad, he was sort of into sort of more guitar rock, so the sort of middle of the road, you know, Chris Rea and the Shadows and stuff like that. And but yeah, when I discovered I think it was it was Motorhead who I first discovered.
Oh yeah,
and it was thanks to a TV show here in England called The Young Ones, which is an iconic like comedy sitcom.
I love The Young Ones.
Yeah, and there's this episode where they're going on to University Challenge.
I remember that. That was so good.
And they had Motorhead play live for the montage, and they did Ace of Spades for it. And
so good.
That was like the first time like I was ever exposed to that style of music. Because like I said, I've been surrounded by pop music, and and you hear like Motorhead, Ace of Spades. It's a massive song, and you hear that, and I just immediately bonded with it. I was just like, I fucking loved it, and I just went out and I found, Guns N' Roses, Iron Maiden, Bon Jovi. We're going 80s here, so back when Bon Jovi kind of was all right. And just like heavy bands like that, and it just sort of like, and it uninstalls that software of what people would expect from you, or what your family expect of you, or anything like that. And then I made
Absolutely.
a small career out of that side of things, so it's kind of worked in my favor too on there. But I got a couple of just a couple of last questions for you, man. I can let you get on with the rest of your evening. So
I actually did drugs with Lemmy in Los Angeles at the Rainbow Room before he died. That's one of the things I'm most proud of.
Fucking hell, that's amazing.
Dude, he's the biggest sweetheart in the world. Like one of the biggest, if there was a Mount Rushmore, he would be on it for metal. And I saw him at Rainbow Room because he was walking from the Comedy Store, and we went there for a comic's birthday, a guy named Justin. And I walked into the room and I had a little bag in my hand, and I looked up and it was Lemmy, and Lemmy looked at me and I looked at him. We both had Coke in our hands. We started laughing. And then he's all, should we have a Coca-Cola challenge? I'm all, absolutely. And then we both sampled each other's Coke. We did key bumps off of each other's keys. And ever since then, every time I'd see him, he called me Hammer. He never forgot. Well, technically he didn't remember my name, but he remembered that it was like a hammer. And every time he saw me, he called me Hammer. He's such a sweetheart.
That's amazing. That is absolutely fucking amazing. Never met the man. I met Phil Campbell, which was his guitarist.
Oh wow!
And that's as close as I got to Lemmy. But that is amazing. That is awesome.
Oh man,
can't
it's so cool.
That's really cool. So, what I want to find out, man, are your three albums that kind of changed your life. So, yeah. That's the question. What are they?
Definitely AC/DC, Dirty Deeds, Done Dirt Cheap.
Nice.
The Germs. It's a tough third one. Jimi Hendrix.
Jimmy, cool.
Was definitely up there, and I'd also say the Beatles. Believe it or not, like the White Album blew my mind.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, coming from the land of the Beatles, my mum was a huge Beatles fan, but yeah, delving into their sort of like their back catalogue away from the sort of like big hits, there are some amazing stuff in there. It's one of those things that surprised me when I was younger, and I was like going through my mum's record collection or whatever, and my dad's old stuff, and finding, and like, I'll just put it on, and you'd hear like, Sgt. Pepper's, and you recognise the song and all that kind of stuff, or Yellow Submarine, but then you delve into, I don't know what they were taking for half of it, but going to that side, but they got some absolutely banging songs that I don't know, obviously they are appreciated, but they were never sort of like one of the singles, so
yeah,
fantastic. And AC/DC, amazing, always amazing, especially that album. I love that album. Hendrix,
it's such a great album.
Yeah. Hendrix, iconic. And Germs, like, I'm gonna go and listen to some Germs. That's why I asked this question, in fact, is so I can sort of rediscover stuff or discover stuff I haven't listened to, but I haven't heard the Germs for so long. I'm just going to go back, and you just, like, when you were talking about them earlier, it reminded me of like just that passionate playing. I mean, they were, for all intents and purposes, a musician point of view, not very good. But like you say, you just want someone who can do something passionately and mean what they're sort of doing as well. So
yeah, they were so good, dude. They were just. I don't think there was ever anybody like them again.
No.
Not like Darby. Darby was just special.
Definitely. So what are your what are your hobbies away from comedy? Like when you're not writing or anything like that, what do you kind of do?
Well, I'm a big traveler, and I really miss that. So I just started. The good thing about, I guess, the pandemic is it's been making me pay attention to things that make me happy besides my obsession with stand-up comedy. So yeah, I mean, playing piano has brought me a lot of joy recently. Photography, I started learning how to shoot. Teaching myself how to be a better photographer, a better film. I'm a huge film buff. And so I've been learning a lot about editing and how to make my own films, and starting to apply some of those learnings to the videos I'm making with my wife.
Cool.
Yeah, those are my biggest passions, I'd say. Photography, travel, always comedy's got to stay on that list. And then music, playing music and listening to music.
Cool. What made you sort of start wanting to play the piano?
It's something I've always wanted to do, and it's something that I don't think I had the patience for it when I was a kid. I think I'd get frustrated, I get frustrated and quit, and frustrated and quit. And I think I wanted to learn to be a more patient person. So I started, and now with technology, it's so much easier, with all the different apps that are out there. So I got myself a Roland Go Keys keyboard it's a phenomenal keyboard for the price.
Yeah.
For a little under 300 pounds, you can get a really nice keyboard with great touch on the keys, and it feels like a real piano.
Nice.
But it's really small and portable. And, there's some really great apps out there. So I just told myself, hey, you tried and quit this a bunch of times, but I always knew I was going to come back to piano. Yeah, so that's why I did it, and I'm really enjoying it. And there's been a bunch of great comedians who've kind of included music in their comedy. Like I used to always say, comedy is just the blues for people that can't play an instrument, or people who can't sing. And I think Chris Rock said that too. I think I didn't say it because I heard Chris. I said it, and then someone told me, "Oh, I think Chris Rock said that." And I was like, "No way." So yeah, there's been. I've never been a huge fan of musical comedy, but now I think I'm more open to it than ever.
Yeah, there's some good ones out there. I think Tim Mincham's a big one, especially.
Oh yeah, Tim is great.
Yeah, he's great. I absolutely love him, and he's doing like West End musical writing as well and stuff like that on top of it.
Yeah,
so
it's awesome.
And going back, sort of like I mentioned at the start, Billy Connolly is another one. Like I love that sort of style of things when he's doing his sort of like folk comedy, if you will.
Yeah,
and that's always great and stuff as well. But yeah, I look forward to see if you incorporate that into your act at some point.
Oh, thanks, man. I think I might one of these days.
That would be really cool. So what are your sort of like finally, what sort of plans are you sort of like putting in place? Like, I'm guessing post sort of COVID, or at least if it calms down enough. Are you planning to go back to America with wife in hand, or is Spain your home for now?
It's funny. You asked a great question. Your timing couldn't have been better. I feel like COVID has sort of hit the reset button for me. And, I have a Swedish wife who's lived in cold her whole life, and then an Egyptian mom who has no business in the cold. But for me, most of the cities that have great comedy are cold weather cities. So my wife and I were chatting, and America is not a place we want to go back to anytime soon. I don't think that the problems are going to go away when Trump goes away. I think he's lit a fire, a really dirty fire. And so we decided to stay in Europe. And I think our goal is to go to Lisbon, because it's a warm weather city with a low cost of living, and it's close to the rest of Europe. So if I can live somewhere where the cost of living is cheap enough to where I can travel every weekend to go do comedy, and even though the comedy scene is small there, and I have some friends in Portugal, so we're going to try to build up the comedy scene there, and then I'm going to travel around Europe and build up my fan base in Europe, and try to be in a place where we feel like the people are kinder, more civilized, they're not afraid of science. It just seems like a better place to be. So that's our plan for the near future, is to get my mom out here and and to get her into Portugal, and we're gonna go there.
Okay, cool, nice. That's really cool. It's like nice to have you over. I mean, technically we're not part of Europe, but as of a couple of weeks ago. But it'll be nice to see you in England, actually.
Thanks, man.
If you do hit over here, do hit me up, and I'll do my best to get to whatever venues you're playing and stuff, and because I'd like to see it live as well. But yeah, no, that sounds awesome, man. I mean, good luck with it.
Right
on. Good luck with the video video cast, the vlog. I will get it one day. I will be watching that. I've subscribed to your channel so people can find that. It's under your name, Tamer Kattan. And yeah, they can find that on YouTube and everything. Is there anything else you want to plug or anything like that while you're on the show?
No. I mean, that's great. What you said is great. Otherwise, another great place to follow me is on Instagram. I'm at Tamer Kat, and it's spelled Tamerkat.
Cool.
The first half of my last name, and that's a great place to stay in touch. And once shows start opening up again.
Cool. Well, Tamer, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me on. It was fun to chat.
Yeah, it was great to chat. I really enjoyed it. It's been worth the wait on my part, so thank you.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate that.
But yeah, like I say, hopefully we'll see you in and around Europe, hopefully in England at some point, doing your stand-up, and get on some of those TV shows. There's plenty of them here. I'll have you.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
Attaboy. From your words to the producer's ears.
Yes, we'll try. I'll see if anyone's listening. But cool, man. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks for having me, brother. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, mate. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.